Call the Wednesday, October 11th, Mount Hills Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Roll call.
Roger Froman.
Sean Cobb.
Chuck Smallwood.
Sylvia Henry. Catherine Eisenberg.
Sam Solars.
Steve Gritman.
Jessica Bonniwell.
Okay. Pledge of Allegiance. Stand, please.
Oh.
Okay. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, seated. Approval of the agenda.
I'll approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of the minutes from the July 12th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
I make a motion to approve the July minutes for Planning and Zoning Commission.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Old business. Update on the preserves developer and progress.
Commission Chair and Commissioners. We haven't had a meeting since July, so I just wanted to give you a formal update sort of on the progress with the preserve. The council decided to go with JP Brooks, which was the developer that you guys had also agreed that was probably the best option for the city. Right now, staff is working on a purchase agreement and sort of getting the TIF process started with them, so we're just sort of working on that. I believe their plan is to start building next year, so.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, moving on to new business. Sacred Settlements zoning amendment discussion. I'll turn it over to Mr. Gritman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commission, the material that you have on this issue comes from legislation that the legislature passed this past spring. They created a statute that requires cities to allow a settlement or a development of tiny houses, essentially, on, say, church property, faith communities, other religious institutions, and they established that with a requirement for a series of standards that apply to the types of units that can be there, how they get service. The sponsoring religious institution has to be part of the project. They have to have a volunteer living in one of the units that they provide. And basically, the way the statute works is they impose this allowance on the definition for religious institutions. So if there's a church, they are presumed to be allowed to have one of these settlements subject to the standards in the law. The purpose of these requirements are to accommodate affordable housing, particularly for homeless individuals. There are a couple of these actually in the Twin Cities Metro, primarily one in St. Paul. There's another one in South Minneapolis, I believe. There's a couple of them that have been established kind of prior to the statute being developed. And there was a lot of advocacy groups that lobbied the legislature to require this allowance as statewide under the statute. So you see the standards that in the staff report, if you had a chance to look at that, that the legislation imposed. The other aspect of the statute is that it does allow cities to, if the city does nothing, there's a presumption that these are allowed, permitted use on a church property, for instance. But they did make an allowance for the cities to create a conditional use permit clause for these types of uses. And so what's in front of you is a proposed ordinance that would do that here. Create a conditional use permit requirement for any of these that local religious institution might want to establish. They would have to come before you and get a conditional use permit. And then the draft ordinance that you have adds to the statutory requirements a series of zoning standards to make sure that, to the extent that we can, that there is compatible with the site and the surrounding neighborhood as we can get them. Just briefly summarizing those, they have to comply with the statutory requirements. They are only allowed as an accessory use, not as a principal use. So if a church owns vacant property, they can't just build one of these settlements, these micro unit or tiny home. It has to be accessory use to the actual church property. The third item is that the setbacks for these facilities, that's not in the statute, but this proposed amendment imposes a setback that's equal to what their neighboring property would be required to have. So if the neighboring property, let's say it's a residential property, is required to have a 30-foot setback from that property line, then these units would also have an equal 30-foot setback from that same line. We added a suggestion that where these uses are adjacent to single-family residential use, there's a requirement for a landscape buffer between along the boundary, so that buffers this type of use from the existing neighborhood. Where they're located next to business or industrial, they have to have a landscape buffer and a screening fence at the boundaries, so that not only is there a landscape separation, but a wall that creates a physical separation, as well as hopefully manages noise and lights a little better than just landscaping. The sixth item here is that the access has to be through the church's parking lot or driveway, not directly out to the street, so they have to function literally as an accessory aspect of the church use, not as a standalone community. And then finally, make sure that there's adequate parking on the site. If the church is going to occupy a portion of their property with these units, they still have to have adequate parking for the church use. And also, this section assigns a 1 parking space per unit requirement in addition to whatever the church needs for its own use as a parking requirement. And then finally, kind of a catch-all condition at the end that allows the city to identify any other needs of a particular site or the community or the neighborhood to continue the intent of your zoning regulations and other planning documents. So those 8 conditions would be added to the statutory requirements. Any facility, any church facility that wanted to establish one of these would, if you adopt the ordinance in this form, would have to come before you for a conditional use permit request. There'd be a public hearing, notification, like any other conditional use permit, and we'd have an opportunity to kind of flesh out what the nature of that project would be. I should note that just as a general planning principle, conditional use permits are presumed to be allowed. So we can't just say, well, now we don't like it, and because you're a conditional use permit, we're not going to issue the permit. We have to have, if there's going to be a denial, it has to be related to some public health, safety, welfare threat that can't be mitigated by conditions that you might add to the permit. So there's a presumption here that these are going to be allowed. And if a church community approaches the city, they'll come through the process. We'll require plans like we typically do for any other conditional use permit. Planning Commission will hold the hearing, and then council will make a final judgment. I guess probably that's the sum of it. Like I said at the beginning, if we don't adopt ordinances, something like this or any other standards that you think are appropriate, then the presumption is it's a permitted use. They could be established just by going out there and siting the units and hooking them up. So the statute was pretty clear that they're going to allow these if they are proposed by the local church communities. I will say that just as a informal comment, I would be, I think these will be pretty rare, just because of the nature of the standards that are placed on them. These tiny home projects, they're not cheap for square footage construction. And the way the statute is written is that a volunteer from the community has to also occupy one of these as kind of a site manager. So my presumption is, without really knowing, but that would be that it'll be a pretty unique situation to see that these things actually happen. Nonetheless, we do recommend the ordinance here just to make sure we're out ahead of that as an issue. If it comes before you, you'll have the opportunity to review it in the conditional use permit forum. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can.
I have one question.
Can you turn your microphone on, please, Catherine? It's blinking red.
It's not really. Now it is, now it's off. It
Is there a
doesn't
church
stay
in
on.
Montrose?
Choose one.
Is there a church in Montrose?
I have a question on
Is there?
item 5
Kind of blown up on my geography.
of the ordinance, of the
Yep.
proposed ordinance, where such uses are located adjacent to any business or industrial landscape buffer, blah, blah, blah. But what about a resident? Can they build a fence if their property abuts a community?
Certainly, yeah. Residents would always have the ability to build a fence per city fence requirements, sure.
Right, in their private property.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, well, I just wanted to clarify that. Because the statutory document is printed in this bill, it just says that and no changes basically are allowed to the statutory.
Right, we can't change the statute. We are allowed to add, though, our zoning regulations that relate to our local community, as long as we're not changing the statute.
Okay, but they also, in the statute, it refers to a tiny home as a mobile unit, a mobile home structure, not a tiny home.
Most of these tiny homes that are being used right now are mobile structures. They're not on permanent foundations. So that's the nature of most of the construction of these. They're pre-manufactured structures.
But they did pass a law that stipulates a tiny home on wheels that's mobile and is livable year-round is
Yeah.
not a recreational vehicle.
Not
It's
a-
considered a home.
Right, that's the way this is written. That's the way the statute's written for
That's the way
this.
the statute's written.
Right, right.
Okay. Well, what about, the faith community is going to have to regulate what takes place within that settlement?
Yes, it would be
I mean, if it's
their
home,
property and their responsibility to manage that.
I mean, they have trash
Facility.
cans, they have fire pits, they have, whatever. So the city is not going to manage that. The settlement is going to.
That's correct, right. If there's a nuisance issue, then the city has its normal nuisance abatement issue, opportunities if something happens, like with any residential area, if somebody is
it's a
using their
zoning
property that way, right, yep.
Well, the statute actually was like 2 pages. I mean, it's a very short document.
Yeah, what you have in the staff report is a summary of what's in the statute. The statute is actually longer than that, but,
It's
so,
not very long.
well, no, it's, I mean,
It's a short. Okay.
Okay,
Well, I would motion to, go forward with the additional standards.
okay, is there any,
So that
Further
that would
questions?
involve having a public hearing, right, to change the zoning ordinance?
Yeah, this would be an amendment to the zoning ordinance, so.
Yeah, so that would be scheduling a public hearing for November so that we can formally pass that and then recommend to
That has to be
council
done
to
with a
approve.
notice like that. Got
Yep.
it. Okay.
Yep, we just wanted to have an initial discussion, see where you guys were at, and,
Okay. So we don't have to motion to do that or anything?
You're
We
welcome
can
to
motion to
call for a
advance
I
public
mean,
hearing.
you're always welcome to make a motion,
We
but
can
if,
motion to advance that, or we don't really need to.
yeah, you can just direct staff to move forward and we'll schedule a public hearing and go forward from here.
Okay. What do you guys think?
I have a question. The language that's in here specifying about the micro units and the minimum standards and all that, is this extracted from the statute?
Yes,
That's from the
Okay.
state, yeah.
yep.
So is it possible to get a copy of the full statute?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay.
I'll make
All
sure we
right,
include
that would be great.
Yep.
The second is that, is there any language that protects us from changes in the statute in the future? In other words, if we go forth on good faith and do an ordinance, it connects to a statute that we have no control over and may very easily become whatever it wishes to become in the future, which is, it puts us as a city in an interesting position, I think, because now we're binding a direction of the city with arbitrary, in my opinion, statutes coming out of the state. Now, there's a fine line there somewhere. I'm not sure where that boundary is at.
I think the answer to your question is no, there is no protection from that.
Right?
The state has the authority to decide these kinds of things. If they decide to amend the statute in some way that we don't like, that's the way that we're subject to whatever
Right.
they choose.
Yeah.
And our zoning authority is basically at the will of the state. So it's secondary to statutory law and legislative action.
Right.
But I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that whatever we come up with, it ought to be able to be a defense against something like that, if that's even possible. So to make it, so there was maybe more, like what we're doing is more hoops to jump through and whatever we can add on so that we would have control over it at this level. Is that,
Well,
am
I
I
mean,
hearing you right?
I don't want to put the city in a position where we're saying yes to all of this and then accidentally become bound to do things that we wouldn't necessarily want in a community 10, 15 years from now. When statutes change, we change, it seems cumbersome. The way that we're going through the process here seems awkward because it doesn't future-proof the city at all.
No, and that's true. It doesn't. And the state has imposed on us
Enforcing it.
Yes.
this,
Right.
this language, and if they decide to change it next year, 10 years, whenever, they'll impose that on us, presumably. And so the only thing that we are able to do is just continue to manage our zoning as best we can. So my effort here in this draft is create some screening, create some setbacks, kind of manage the way the site's done the best we can. And that's the extent of our power, I think, in
Right.
this area. Unfortunately, I understand what your concern is, and but I don't know that we've got any way to insure ourselves from those kinds of eventualities.
Right.
This is the best case scenario for our city, that we would have some sort of, oversight on what they can and can't do when they come in. Because they could come in if they want based on the ordinance.
Correct, that's correct.
okay, any other
Well, I
discussion?
think you're correct in your assumption that there isn't going to be a lot of sacred settlements? Because it's too expensive. I mean, one of these tiny homes can cost up to $40,000 to meet all the building standards or all the building codes. And the faith communities have to come up with that.
Right.
Those funds, they have to provide this housing. And they have to find a volunteer
Yeah.
resident to live there also.
Right.
So it's, I think I think this is good to protect us as best we can. I mean, it's for the homeless. I mean, it's for a good cause,
Yeah, if this state does amend anything to it in the future, we can look at chapter 1031 and maybe we have to add or adjust something in the future.
Well, yes, and see how things play out. But but the homeless consists of of many, many different categories of people.
Yeah.
And they also are vetted by the faith community. It's just not people coming in. They have to pay rent on these tiny homes, a small amount, $200 to $400 a month. Isn't that correct?
There is a presumption that they will have a rent requirement, right?
Well, that's what the statute
Yeah.
states.
It's true, but there are ways that their incomes can be subsidized to manage those issues too. So the city will not be in charge of deciding whether a certain person qualifies. That's the burden is on the faith community.
Yeah, everything's on the faith community.
Yeah.
We're just responsible for the zoning.
So what do we do next?
We just move forward, set up a public hearing, get that published, and,
Everybody good with that?
I think you should know.
yep.
We'll plan for that for an upcoming meeting then.
November. Are we done discussing that?
I believe so.
Okay. Mr. Chair, we have 2 additions to the agenda.
Oh, we already approved it.
I know. You can still add.
Okay.
The first is to discuss the property, the lot at 231 Center Avenue South, right out here. It's an empty lot.
Okay.
The second, Mayor Moyna would just like to address the commission.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Mayor Moyna would like to address the commission.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. If you want to fill us in on the 231 first, or,
Can you guys just make a motion to approve that addition to the agenda?
okay. Looking for a motion to approve the updated agenda, including 231 Center Avenue and Mayor Moyna to speak.
I'll make a motion to update the agenda, right?
Yep,
Minutes, agenda for both.
just the agenda.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair and Commission, we have Mr. Travis Hellkamp here this evening. He wanted to come in and discuss possibly moving a house to the property at 231 Center Avenue South. Oops.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, come in and you can just state your name and current address.
Okay, yeah, my name is Travis Hellkamp. My current address is in St. Paul. It's 569 Portland Avenue, apartment number 306, zip code 55102. And so my wife and I have a house that her father gave to her. It's sitting up on steel girders right now. We've been looking for a property to move it to, and we've been looking at places in Wright County. So we previously got an approval to move it to a larger piece of land. That didn't pan out. we're currently looking at this piece of land. We have a general contractor on board. We have the bank on board. We wanted to get your guys' feedback before we put an offer in on the property. So essentially, it's a 30-foot wide. We have plans for it, so I can send those and distribute them to you guys. But it's a 30-foot wide by 60-foot long Rambler. It's a 1960s construction Rambler. We would build a foundation for it, and one of the portions of the house got cut off basically when they moved it. So we would extend off of that some, and then it's a 20 by 25-foot garage. So basically, we'd have a slab for the garage and a 60-foot long by 30-foot with a, say, 12-foot long extension by 16-foot long on one end of the house coming out, one way or the other. So we've walked it a few different times. We've looked at it. We'd probably like to put it 60 feet lengthwise, which is, it's a 83-foot wide property. So it gives us it's a pretty narrow space to work with on both sides, but I think there's 10-foot setbacks. We'd maybe like to push it a little closer to one side than the other, so we'd be able to drive a truck into the backyard. And then we would like to put the garage up in the front corner towards the northeastern end of the property. And we could follow whatever setbacks are required, although we might ask for a slight variance for everything to work well. So I have pictures, I've got plans that were drawn up by an architect. I can share that with the group.
Okay.
Where's the property?
It's actually right across the street, just about. It's like,
It's across the street.
Yeah.
it's just a vacant lot right now. They've been trying to sell. There is a for sale sign, I believe, right in the front yard, so if you leave, you might be able to see that. It's dark, but yeah, it's kind of like kitty corner right from here, across the street,
So we got a baby on the way. We're trying to get out of the city.
right across from the church, yeah. I don't know if there, Mr. Gripman, if you think there's any issues,
I mean, I think as long as all the typical stuff is followed.
and if they would need a variance, if that would be reasonable, given the circumstances.
Would there need to be variances that would be?
Maybe for the setbacks, just because of the width of the house.
Yeah, I don't think there need to be, but we would probably
You'd
request
like to have them,
so
yeah.
I don't think it'd be like required for us to work it
Okay.
out, but.
What kind of setbacks are you looking at, do you think?
I mean, so we'd be able to meet the 10 feet. If we could push it to 8 feet on one side or the other, that would give us 12 to 13 feet, enough to get a truck through basically on one side of the house. And then the garage, we'd probably want to maybe have a little closer to the boundary than that. But if that's not okay, we can live without it. But maybe 6 feet or 5 feet from the border of the property, along that northern edge towards the front of the lot.
And what kind of property is that adjacent then, that, like,
There's a residential property north of it, and then I'm not even sure that property to the south, if that's abandoned or if it's residential.
Yeah, it's all residential, it's,
the property that you'd be close to would be near that neighbor or on the other end?
It's the one that was
Sorry.
highlighted there.
it's zoned, residential business, I believe.
Right.
It'd be by the residential ones.
Do you need a public hearing for variance?
So at the top of that, is that north, that's north and south facing,
Yeah,
the top
yeah,
up
north
is
and
north,
south,
okay.
yeah.
That's so for variance.
Yeah, there would be a public hearing requirement for a variance. Just to move the house, that's an administrative permit, so,
But the variance, you would need to notify all the
correct,
surrounding residents.
that's correct. Right.
How big is that lot?
It's about 83 feet wide,
It's 100 or 240 feet long.
and 240-some feet deep.
And there's those people already living there?
Yeah,
Is it possible just to say, is it cool with you guys? I mean, is that even a,
Well, if they
Think
really
anymore?
needed a variance, it would,
too much legal stuff?
have to be a formal
we gotta-
process, yeah.
There's channels. Okay. That's this. I got you.
Yeah, we can't actually turn our zoning authority over to the neighbors.
All right, well, trying to empower the people around here, so.
Yeah, we did this a few years ago with the,
Over by the ball
Cal
field?
Ralston's.
Yep, yep,
They put that house, they tucked that house in
Yeah.
between there.
yep.
So, yeah.
But variances are recorded at the county. It goes along with the property.
I'm sorry, what?
I said variances are recorded at the county recorders.
Yeah.
It goes along, you know.
I mean, some of you guys that have experience in this kind of stuff, I mean, what have you done in the past?
We'd have to look at, where they want to put it, how close it is.
You'd have to look at the plans.
Yeah, we'd have to.
Yeah,
look
they'd
at-
have to have
Okay.
the plan submitted and all of that in order to apply for the actual variance.
Submitted, or?
Yes, but the state.
If I was gonna shift the house, I'd
Says that.
shift it that way,
Practical
to their garage.
difficulties are part of the decision-making process for granting variances.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the first part of what you were saying.
The statute does state that practical difficulties are a reason for
Yeah,
granting variances.
right,
So what is the practical difficulty? You need to.
well, I
need
think
to-
that's what we would have to take a look at.
Yeah, that's why we'd have to look at the drawings and
Yeah,
the maps and stuff.
for a pre-manufactured home that, or I know manufactured home, I mean, pre-existing structure that is being moved, you might consider that, you might consider setbacks of adjoining neighbors. The one example is that the property to the south looks like it's got a very shallow or narrow setback as well, so there might be some character of the neighborhood that supports a narrower setback than just what your code
Yes,
requires.
but you're just going to have to evaluate all.
Yeah,
of
you'll have to look through each of those and decide whether it applies. Right.
Yeah, this is the older section of town, so the setbacks might not all be uniform, right?
Yeah, I guess we just have to look at the lot map
Plans, yeah.
and how you want to position the buildings
Yeah,
on the lot. And I guess we could take it from there.
okay. So I guess in principle, can we get approval to move the house regardless of variances? Because we can put an offer in tomorrow and get the ball rolling, and then come back in the future with the exact plan of what we're gonna do, draw everything up. Because we're gonna need to get permitting, we're gonna need to jump through other
Yeah.
hoops and deal with those other questions at a later date. Is that possible?
I'd refer this one back to Mr. Gritman.
Presuming that, setting the variance and setback issues aside, presuming that the house is a habitable house or it can be made so, it's an administrative permit to move it onto the site. If you put it on the property in a way that meets all the setbacks, then there's really
No issue.
no issue.
Okay.
That it's just an administrative process to make sure it meets code.
Yeah,
Then later, if you decide you want to put it in a way that requires a setback variance, that's what will have to take
Okay.
you through the,
okay.
Yeah.
So, well,
Process.
and so I had, because we were looking at this previously, we had the Wright County inspector look at the house before it was even moved. He approved it with a couple of minor tweaks to a couple of the windows that need to be a little wider for egress. But otherwise, it, according to him, met code. The other question is, do we have to go to the Wright County Board for any reason after this, or you guys have?
Wright County would not have any authority on this from a zoning standpoint.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll have to, your house mover company will have to make sure they've cleared their route.
Yeah, and that's his,
So admit, if there are county roads, sometimes there's some issues there that you need, they will need
okay.
to manage.
Okay, so we don't even necessarily need an approval from the board today, because it's an administrative approval? Okay,
I would advise you to touch base with the city's building official too, just to make sure, I mean, the county does their own thing.
yeah,
Presumably, they're using the same code, but you want to talk to the city building
no,
official
definitely, that's a great idea.
to make sure there isn't any
I'll
other
reach out
hiccups.
to him tomorrow.
Yeah, I can send you guys
Okay,
that
perfect.
information.
Yeah, All right. Well, I think that's all I got for you guys, unless you have any questions for me.
No?
Sweet.
Good luck, man.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck.
Thank you, Travis. Mayor Monia?
Kirby Moyna, 114 Crystal Court. Yes, Mayor of Montrose. First, I just wanted to say thank you to you guys. You guys are doing a good job, and I don't think we give you enough recognition as planning and zoning. You're kind of the forgotten child as far as the commissions go, so I wanted to say thank you. The other thing too, they're not specific to this commission, but there have been complaints sent to me from bystanders about commission members, again, not specific to you guys, using cell phones during commission meetings. And just kind of wanted to give a reminder to you guys. Park and Rec will get theirs next month where they have their meeting. Council's going to get a reminder as well. If you use a cell phone during a public city meeting, you can open your phone up to being subpoenaed for the records of everything you were doing on your phone at that time. So I just want to remind everybody, just so that nobody gets into that situation, because it could be open meeting law stuff, it could be Public Records Act stuff. So just, be mindful of it, just in case somebody does want to do something.
Kirby, I have hearing aids, and my True app, my hearing is on my app, and I have to adjust it.
Yeah, and that's
On
something
my
that's
phone.
different as far as I understand. Like if you have to use for those type of purposes, or like a computer to look at.
I mean, I had to just a short while ago, I couldn't hear anything.
Yeah, it's more for like if you're texting, posting on social media, sending Snapchats, those type of things.
Watching videos.
Yeah, watching videos on your phone, or TV
YouTube.
shows.
Yeah.
So
I've seen
it's
it done.
those type of things that, if you do use it for those things, the Public Records Act could be requested against you, and then it's a whole mess of stuff. And there was a story I actually was reading today when I was kind of looking at some of this, where there was a council member somewhere else in the U.S. that they had their records requested, and then it came out, because now it was all public record, that this council member was having an affair with a girlfriend, and all of his emails that he was exchanging with her became public record. So I don't think anybody wants that. Not that you're messaging
think one of
girlfriends
you-
while you're up there, but
I think one of your predecessors did this.
I won't comment on that. But that's all I had to say. And again, just I wanted to thank you guys too. So, and
I appreciate
thanks for
it
adding
very
me.
much.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Kirby.
Didn't we originally at one time have no cell phones at the council meeting?
Yep,
They were to be shut off.
yep.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
That would take care of it, Kirby.
It's just like at a high school, if you just had a box that they had to put them in when they walked into the classroom, but the kids don't want to follow it either. But I just wanted to give a friendly reminder, just because I don't want anybody to go through that, and I certainly don't want to either. So I always make sure that I'm not using mine in any way. So
Well, I work for Ramsey County, and we had protocol, and people thought they were privately sending emails or whatever. Ramsey County knew everything they were sending.
no fun. Government doesn't need to know any more than they already do. So
Okay.
thank you guys.
Thank you. All right. There's no further discussion. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, November 8th, 2023, held here at the Community Center at 7 p.m. I look for a motion for adjournment.
I make
Move
a
to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned at
Okay.
7:38.
Boy, it was a long.
You gotta fix